Greetings, I'm Demonac, and it's arena time. Once again, we've gone from 1 and 2 up to 5 and 2. Let's see if we can keep this hot potato in the air. But I have a number of crazy combo type things I can do. And it's been so long I don't even remember if I've had a silly unstable portal game. I think I had a crappy unstable portal. Because there are times, it's super random, but you can get an early unstable portal, and it can just flat out win you the game, like a good innervate. I mean, technically it's a secret, so technically it's like a combo, but not especially. We'll keep this anyway. Because I have the Illuminator, I'm a little bit friendlier towards the mirror entity. There's some chance it might work out, even though if it works out, I'm probably not taking that much damage. So the Illuminator probably won't be healing me anyway, but just due to the apparent synergy, it makes me more inclined to keep the secret than I normally would. Okay, Snow Chuggers are pretty annoying for paladins and other weapon classes. Although having them both up front means it's probably not going to work out too well for their lockdown abilities.
Powering up. Portals online.
You got your portal online. I hate to leave something alive on a paladin that could then be buffed, but we're going to go forward anyway, because I'd rather be locking him down. And I'll drop the Illuminator. Bye. So I could also just play the Shield Bearer and shoot that guy for one. I don't know how that's going to work out. I'd rather shoot him for one when I'm actually going to kill him. If it gets a Blessing of Kings, then it will be annoying. That's also pretty annoying. I'll give you that. Piloted Shredder, pretty rough. Not a great setup for sheep, that's for sure. We're gonna go bang.
The light shines.
Bang. Gonna shoot that. Do I really need him to shield these guys? I don't think I care about those guys that much. I'm gonna play the Snow Chugger instead. They have 3 hit points, so the Consecrate would not devastate me. He'll probably just kill this, because it won't freeze his guy or get him. Although if he kills that, then I can just shoot him to finish him. Hobgoblin, bad. Oh. Yeah, okay, that's pretty bad. The Hobgoblin has to go. Not be permitted to survive. Yeah, the Sheepsplosion isn't going to serve me very well right now. Take too much effort to get rid of this stuff. So I think I'm going to want to trade a Snow Chugger to kill him, or... Yeah, if I keep her alive, I could play the Mirror Entity, and I'll heal 4 from it. I'm not doing much with my turn, though. Whereas I could get this guy out and be good. I really need this to be dead. Which means I'm not playing him, so... Actually... Yeah, okay, well, let's kill that, because it's bad. Yeah, I guess we'll just do that. So I'm keeping her alive. Now, do I want to freeze one of those guys? That's controlling what gets killed, but I don't think it's helped me that much. Let's just freezing him. Still, I mean, he may not have any weapons, but it sure seems productive to be freezing him. Okay, so that guy froze himself. You're definitely going to kill her. You're not going to leave her alive, because you hit me, I just keep healing from her. She does give that kind of control.
Reporting for duty.
Now the problem is I can't Sheepsplosion and shoot one of the 1 health guys at the same time. I could kill this. I could kill either one of them. If I kill him, it might come out with something that's better. on the other hand, he's bigger. If I kill this, I know that the two 1/1s are going to die from the sheep explosion. So, yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. Probably not a genius move here, but whatever. See what for the recombobulator. Okay, it's basically just a 3/2. Right, doesn't trigger. As it turns out, I would have been better off killing the other way, but it was. I knew what I was getting rid of with the spiders. Ah, he's not frozen. No. Wow. Didn't play anything for me to mirror entity, and that guy is a big threat to the Silverhand Knight, too. That's pretty obnoxious. Now, again, Questing Adventurer and Cone of Cold is just for that guy, which is sad. But I do have a mirror entity that I'm going to get a copy of whatever he plays. He can sword this guy, which will suck, but I can just shoot that the next turn.
Give me a quest.
There. That was a pretty loser turn. Not getting me ahead in any way, shape, or form. But whatever. Hope to neutralize his Blessing of Might. He knows I don't have a duplicate. Kills that guy for cheap. And then what? Oh, if only I got the battle cry off that. It would be the most hilarious thing ever. But no. Just a Swamp Ooze. The Nullifier. Well, that's not great. Wish I had a copy of that. Which is obviously why he did things in the order he did. So, it turns out I'm not going to shoot him. I'm just going to Flamestrike and then kill this thing. I have another Flamestrike coming somewhere. But, just let me target him, you stupid depth error. Anyway, getting the battlefield clear there is not the worst. Although, I don't have a mirror entity out if he plays something good now. I could be in trouble. I'm hoping this guy is going to help me repopulate, but realistically, I'm not in good shape. Yeah, that's horrible. Getting my own copy of the 5/6 would have been helpful. Oh, let's Unstable Portal first, see what kind of crap it gives me, because yeah, it gave me a 1-cost piece of crap. Like, I do not have good luck with Unstable Portals. I'm starting to hate that card, because too many times my opponent has gotten a ridiculously strong legendary, and I've gotten something that costs 1 mana. Not good. Do I start shooting this guy just so that I can get him the next time? I think I do. I don't think that 1 damage to the Paladin is going to matter as much, whereas I think the 1 damage to him might. That's unfortunate. Oh, great. That means I didn't mirror entity again.
Reporting for duty.
Another big fat thing came out. Wasn't thinking, and now I'm doomed. I cannot recover from this. No, he just played his 2 big guns. He's not going to play another big thing now, especially he already has the army advantage, and I've got a big secret. Yeah, okay, piece of junk. If my 1 free damage kills him, that would be awesome, but no. It would be awesome. It wouldn't actually improve my situation in any realistic fashion. Yeah, you want to kill him with the 7/7, because he's too close to letting me finish off the other guy. You got a buff for him too? Joy. No, this is where I'm going down, people.
Reporting for duty.
Let's draw a Flamestrike right now. Flamestrike right now would almost do it. Actually, a Flamestrike right now would have been hilarious in that she would have totally screwed me by giving health to that guy. No, I still could have recovered. I would have had the 2 damage from him and the 1 damage from this, so I guess I could have done it, but I'm so doomed. I'm not even going to attack with him. Because why? I don't know. Drawing a Flamestrike would be nice, though, because nothing short of a Flamestrike is going to help me. Flamestrike would almost even out the board.
Reporting for duty.
So I've already used the sheep and one Flamestrike. I only have a 1 in 15 chance, which is pretty poor. Sludge Belcher is a pretty strong alternative to Flamestrike, I'll give you that. But I'm going to attack. Sludge Belcher is very good. I still need, like, some pretty impressive top decking to possibly survive, though. That hurts my chances a lot. The two 1/1s can take this out, although they'd both be dead. Oh, now one of them can take it out and not be dead. Awesome. Yeah, I still need a Flamestrike to have... Oh, that's good. Now the Flamestrike won't even help that much. I mean, I can still kill everything, so I guess it doesn't make a difference. Like, yeah, no. No, that is game over.
I got the best deals anywhere.
Flamestrike still could have saved me, actually. Could have equalized the game, because I would have Flamestrike shot this guy. The entire enemy forces would have been dead. I would have had very few hit points. But we would have been equal-ish for cards. But no. Oh well. Did get back up to... From 1-2 up to 5-2 is a pretty triumphant comeback, so not too bad. Let's see what we get here. And then it's time to go through all the neutral cards from Goblins versus Gnomes. I guess that's a good chunk of dust. Let's see if I get anything cool in my packs. In my pack, I mean. Probably not. Oh. Flame Leviathan. Sweet. Now I got to decide whether to play with it, but probably yes. But, I mean, it's a 7/7 for 7. But when you draw it, it deals 2 damage to all characters, which is cool because it costs you no mana, but you have 0 control over that, which makes it kind of iffy. Still, that and a gold rare. That's actually a pretty darn good pack. Wow. Kick ass. So, I have to go into my collection anyway, because we're going to take a look at the only Goblins vs. Gnomes cards that I haven't done yet, which is the neutrals. But just for OCD people's sake, I'm going to knock off the new tag from those things. So, Goblins vs. Gnomes, crafting mode engaged. No, I just have all of these. I'm used to hitting crafting mode and having it change, but this is all like neutral junk. I mean, common junk. So, for starters, we have the target dummy, who is rare for some reason. I mean, 0/2 taunt for 0 seems kind of lame, but I mean, he's probably better than the Goldshire Footman. Goldshire Footman costs you 1, but is not a mech. And, of course, being 0 cost and not entirely useless, because with taunt, he's not entirely useless. Even late game, he will likely eat an attack from something. So, he could definitely have a place in the obvious choice is rogue decks, because you can trigger combo cheaply. And if you have like a rogue mech deck, you could get advantages from that. I mean, he lets you can play him for free before playing one of the guys, and we'll see some later, that get an advantage if you have a mech in play. Technically, you could use him with the Cogmaster as like a rush combo, but I think the Cogmaster is a piece of crap, right? He's a 1/2 for 1, and he has +2 attack, making him a 3/2, but only when you have a mech. So the thing is, if your opponent is attacking, they can kill your mech first, which reduces this guy to a 1/2, which is pretty useless. He's only 1 mana cheaper than an actual 3/2. And for that extra mana, you could get a 3/2 that had a good ability, not just like a crap ability. Like you could get a 3/2 that has a really great ability for 2 mana. So he is sort of rushy, but his rush is contingent on getting like a Clockwork Gnome or just having like a really awesome draw. And I don't know. I don't think that his rush potential makes it worthwhile to have him in your deck. As he's too small a card. He doesn't do enough for you. The Clockwork Gnome you're going to see more of. I mean, a 2/1 for 1 is sort of a quintessential turbo rush sort of creature. Being a 2/1 mech for 1, again with all the keywords in of all the keywords in the game, mech is one of the stronger ones because so many cards in this expansion are affected by it, and there isn't a hoser for it anyway. They're all like, it's always good to be a mech. So he's a 2/1 for 1, which is fine. He's a mech, which is good. And then he has Death Rattle, so he's good with the Death Rattle combo stuff. And when he dies, he's like his Death Rattle is to give you a spare part card. Now a spare part card, they're like I think 6 different ones, it might be 7, whatever. They're 1 mana spells. And some of them are just very weak. Some of them are very strong but very situational. The fact is though, I figure getting a spare part is worth at least half a card. So, a 2/1 mech, if you compare the 2/1 Murloc for 1, has no abilities. 2/1 mech is at least as good as a 2/1 Murloc for the same cost, and he's giving you an extra half a card. So, in the right kind of deck, he is actually a surprisingly good, like, rush bot. Now, what the spare parts, okay, there's the different spare parts, they all cost 1 mana, they're all a spell. One of them is, like the armor plating is +1 hit point. The Whirling Blades gives +1 attack. There's the something or other, whatever, the coolant is the one that just freezes a minion until end of turn. Or freezes a minion for 1 turn. Which is actually very strong. Like late game freezing a critical or just large minion can be a big swing. So that freezing a minion for 1 turn is pretty damn good. There's one that returns a friendly minion to hand, which of course, just like the pandas, that's very strong. For 1 mana, you can get back a minion. You still have to pay the minion's casting cost to play it again, but you can full heal a minion, you can get back Divine Shields, you can reuse Battle Cries, you can reuse Death Rattles, right? I mean, well, no, okay, that's not, because you're not killing him, you're just returning him to hand, so forget I said that. But yeah, you get to reuse Battle Cries with that thing, as well as healing your guys. It's actually pretty awesome under the right circumstances. Usually I find my hand clogged with them and nothing good to do with them, because it's so random and your deck isn't necessarily designed with that in mind, but it's pretty good. There's also the reversing switch, which does the alchemist thing. It switches the attack and defense of a minion. And that's tremendously useful. I've actually put the alchemists in my cleric deck, my priest deck now, because especially for a priest, they have so many things that are like, if the attack is less than 2 or less than 3, or in some cases greater than 5, like greater than 4, whatever. Being able to control that is tremendously useful for those cards, but even just for normal purposes, being able to switch the attack and defense of a minion. Because it's not friendly minion, that's still any minion. So if you look at all the minions in play, and you have the option for 1 mana to switch the power and toughness of any one of them, so you can change one of your minions around to have more offense or just have enough defense to survive, or you can change the opposing minion, unless they all have relatively equal attack and defense, there's a really good chance that can let you swing a battle in your favor. So that's pretty awesome. I think that was only 5, so I'm probably missing it. Oh, there's one, the unstable cloaking device. That's the other one, if there are only 6. Which is just stealth, give a minion stealth until end of turn. And that's also very situational, but it's pretty damn strong. You can hit something with a minion, leaving your guy almost dead, and then you can stealth him, so that unless they have an area of effect, he's almost certain to survive to attack again. Or if you're playing a minion that has a crazy special ability that you need him to, or just playing any minion, you need it to live long enough to attack. You play a minion, stealth him, that's really strong to be able to put it on whatever you want. In fact, the spare parts, if you had a choice, they'd be like the most like an incredibly powerful thing. The reason that they're treated as a very cheap ability is because you can't control it. Usually you're going to draw whichever one you don't need. And they're all different enough, and the powerful ones are situational, the stat ones are kind of weak, but still, spare parts in general are good. It's just like more cards, even if you only value them at half a cost due to the randomness, half a card. So anyway, there is Annoyatron. You see a lot of him in the arena. He also makes the Goldshire Footman look like a piece of crap, because for 1 more mana, you get same 1/2 taunt, but he has a Divine Shield, so he can eat 1 attack from something big, or at least waste someone's hero power. Now, because he only has 1 attack, rogues and druids have no problem whatsoever, like, stabbing or kung fuing this guy. He's not great against those classes, but even then, that's still like another action, that's still 2 mana they have to spend. It just takes more effort to get rid of him than, like, the Footman especially. Significantly more effort. And just like the target dummy or the Footman are a little useful when you draw them late in the game, because at least they're going to draw 1 attack or 1 action from your opponent. This guy, as weak as he seems, for 2 mana, he's going to draw at least 2 attacks or 2 actions of some kind from your opponent, which can be, that's not a small deal. So and then of course he's a mech, which means anything that actually buffs mechs can suddenly make his taunt and Divine Shield much more annoying. We have the Explosive Sheep, who, as we saw, is one of my favorite new cards for the Mage. I mean, anyone can use him, but really, he's a powerful new card for the Mage. Because you get a whole 1/1 for 2. His mech keyword is less likely to come in handy, because putting him out is giving your opponent, like, he doesn't have charge, unless you have unless you're a warrior, basically, in which case you might be able to swing that. But if he doesn't have charge, and if you're not shooting him right away with your mage ability, then you're putting out this thing and giving your opponent control over whether or not to trigger the 2 damage to all minions. So you have to be careful about when you play him. But he's cheap, neutral, deals 2 damage to all minions. That is a pretty big swing, so there's definitely got to be some use for him out there. And of course, as a mage, he just gives you that control. For 4 mana, you can do 2 damage to everything. Which is a pretty good ratio as far as area of effect spells. Yeah, Consecrate hits your opponent's hero and doesn't hit yourself. But for a neutral card, it's almost as good as Consecrate, if you're a mage. I don't know. You could make arguments that mages have enough, like, area damage spells and stuff like that, but I like him a lot better than Arcane Blast. I would rather have a card that takes way more effort, but does twice as much. Now, Arcane Blast is better now if you have because there are more good spell power minions for the mage, but if you're not playing a lot of spell power, he's awesome. He's fantastic for a mage in the arena, which is one of the main things I care about. The Gilban Stalker is pretty damn good. Like, he has no keywords. He's not any kind of thing. He's like half goblin, half merfolk, whatever. Nobody really cares what he is. He's a croc, like a 2/3 for 2, who also comes with stealth. And in those early game exchanges, that gives you a lot of control over how to use him. Just like the 2/1 Worgen with stealth. It's pretty nice. It's a good first turn play because you put it out there and it's not going to die unless some kind of weird AoE goes off. At 2/3, this guy is way tough enough that he's not going to get AoE'd. Like, the idea that something random is going to kill him through his stealth is much, much less likely. Unless your opponent's going to spend like a flame cannon on him, which is probably fine. But that means that he comes out, he can sit there, and you can choose when and how to use him. If your opponent has nothing else out, then you can just start beating him down like any other 2/3. If your opponent has a 3/2 out there, it's totally up to you whether you want to kill that or try and control the situation in some other way. Plus, he's very good for receiving buffs. Because he comes out with, like, he's got decent stats for he's got good stats for 2 mana, about as good as you're going to get without a drawback. And he's guaranteed to live long enough for you to get your mana back, and next turn cast a Blessing of Kings or a Velen's Chosen or something on him and have him able to attack with it right away. Or Blessing of Wisdom would be pretty sweet. Guarantee you get your card back from that. I mean, Blessing of Wisdom, anything. It's not especially good with that. It's more about the buff ones where you want to, like, start killing things. But yeah, I don't know how much he's going to be seen around, but he definitely, for a class that has for a deck that has a lot of buffs, like most paladins, he's a pretty strong contender for an early game play. The Mech Warper, you're probably going to see a lot of Mech Warpers, because if you're making a deck based around mechs, here's a Croc who has also got the mech keyword, and he makes your other mechs cost 1 less. Unlike, you think about the 2/2 Gnome, who makes your first minion every turn cost 1 less. She doesn't work the turn she comes into play, right? Because she is, by definition, the first minion you played that turn, or at least if you played her this turn, you have played a minion this turn. It's impossible not to have. You could have played something else first. You still played a minion. You don't get her ability. The Mech Warper, you can go on your second turn or first turn with the coin. You can go Mech Warper, Clockwork, Clockwork. It's like 1 cost turns into free, 2 cost turns into 1, and that's right away. So he lets you just flood the battlefield with stuff. He's actually almost closest to the Defias guys from the Rogue deck in what he's doing. And right next to him is a pretty good partner for him if you want a 3 mana play. Mech Warper, and then he'll reduce the cost, and you can play the Micro Machine, who looks a little bit like an Imperial Probe Droid, but really, he's going to probe you in ways that you do not appreciate. He's only a 1/2 for 2, but he is a mech, and of course, he's got the offensive version of the Gruul ability. He gets +1 attack at the start of each turn, and it's not your turn, it's each turn. So when you play him for 2 mana, ignoring the Mech Warper combo, which is good with all kinds of things, it's just good. But you play the Micro Machine as your 2 mana play. On your opponent's turn, he's already up to a 2/2. So he's not trading all that well, but he at least does an okay amount of damage. He can already kill 3/2s. And yeah, 2/3s will beat him. 2/3s beat most things that you play with 2 mana. If he doesn't die right away, on your turn, he's already a 3/2. So you can kill a larger, possibly even a more expensive minion, or just hit your opponent for 3, and on their turn, he'll be a 4/2 when they try and attack him, so he'll probably take out whatever they use to attack him at that point. This guy will keep growing. If you can protect him somehow behind a taunt, he's one of those cards like the Ghoul, only they have different advantages, but like the Flesh-Eating Ghoul or whatever that thing's called, he's one of those minions that doesn't cost all that much, but under the right circumstances, he can just go crazy and end up huge and cause a giant problem for your opponent. The Puddle Stomper, I don't play Murloc decks a lot, but I'm sure this guy is a huge boon for Murlocs. Because, I mean, a 3/2 for 2 is fine, but having a 3/2 for 2 that triggers all your Murloc benefits has got to be awesome. He certainly, if you have the Murloc giving the battle cries +2 health to all Murlocs, turns this guy into quite a dangerous threat just with that. Whereas a lot of the other Murlocs are small enough that +2 defense is, it's good. It really helps their deck to function, but it's not that, it doesn't make them as scary as the 3/4 Puddle Stomper. The Recombobulator he's kind of messed up. 3/2 for 2, so he's fine. He transforms a friendly minion into a random minion with the same cost. So this is definitely not a bad ability, because if you have no other minions out, you just play him. He's a 3/2 for 2. if you have a damaged minion, or any minion that has a battle cry and doesn't have very good stats. So you can play your minion, get the battle cry out of him, and then recombobulate like a novice engineer, and maybe get something good. I mean, if she's a 1/1 for 2, she's got to turn into something better. You're not going to get a worse 2-mana creature than a 1/1 with no abilities. And of course, it can potentially turn into something really great. Now, obviously, you're transforming them, you're not going to get their battle cry. But if they have a death rattle, you might get that. And, I mean, it also starts working, if you get larger minions, they can still have big battle cries and not do that much. And he can then come out and turn him into something potentially very threatening. Yeah, no, he's very interesting in that. I think there are enough minions with every different casting cost number now that it would be hard to pull any really weird trick. But one of the ideas is if you could get out something like, you start thinking about, I don't think there's any particularly good one, but like the Giants, they have very high casting cost, and you're probably not paying all of it. So if you have a 12 cost or an 11, if you have an 11 cost Giant and you recombobulate him, he's either going to turn into himself or something pretty large and impressive. I don't know. I don't know if there's any particularly awesome trick there. Someone will probably bring them up in the comments. There might be some sweet spot casting costs where, like, maybe it's 7 mana, you're almost guaranteed to get something awesome, but it's already a 7 mana minion. You're going to be giving up something that's pretty good too. The fact that he can do it for healing is pretty good. If you find a casting cost that has an abnormal percentage of charge minions, maybe that would be good, but I don't think that exists. I think that any particular casting cost, there are a lot of things that aren't going to have charge, and they're going to outnumber the charge ones. So he's always going to be exceedingly random, is I think what I'm saying. I don't think you can get around that, but he still has some potential. If nothing else, just as a strong form of healing, though it of course doesn't trigger healing effects. The ship's cannon, I think we are going to see pirate decks. I haven't seen any really, but it seems like there's got to be a way to make it viable now, because they added a couple more pirates that have different sizes. So there's a large pirate now. We'll see him later. He's a 7/4 with no abilities for 5 mana. That is a large pirate. So you've got some more flexibility in what pirates do. The cannon itself is not a pirate, but it's another 2/3 for 2, so it's a very solid early game play. And then if you play this, and then you can follow it up with a pirate right away, you're doing a double damage knife juggler, right? You're going to do 2 damage to your opponent, or 2 damage to one of their minions. So just ship's cannon plus the 2/1 charge guy, the guy who only has charge if you have a weapon. Even if you don't have a weapon, suddenly that guy's starting to look like a pretty good play, because he's going to distribute 2 random damage for his 1 mana casting cost. So I think someone will find a good use for the cannons. Stone Splinter Trog, I don't especially like. He's one of those. They have to make a bunch of common minions. Some of them are going to be weaker than others. He's not my favorite. I mean, he's a 2/3 for 2, and he does get +1 attack whenever your opponent casts a spell. So he does kind of hose them for if they have the coin. If you go first, he can be pretty annoying that way. If they don't use the coin first, because of course you can't coin him out if you went first. So they have an opportunity to coin out a 2-cost thing on their first turn. But if you play him before they use the coin, that's just an extra level of annoyance for them, because now he's going to be at least a 3/3, and if they wanted to coin out a spell, then he's going to be a 4/4. But I don't know. There are so many strong 2-mana plays now, even with the exact same stats. There are a lot of things I'd rather have out than this guy. I do like the bigger Trog, we'll see later. The Flying Machine, they made a lot of 1/4 for 3 minions. They're just kind of trolling people, because nobody actually likes 1/4 for 3. Those are bad stats. I used to complain about the Ape all the time. I still do. It's not good. But they put in a bunch of them, partially because, like, this guy, for example, is a mech. So there are a bunch of things that benefit mechs specifically, and you could try and combo him. If you have there's that warrior mech we saw that the Screwjank, whatever, some janky-ass name. But when it comes into play, it gives a mech +2/+2. The flying machine is weak on its own, but it's an extremely powerful recipient for buffs, because it's got that Wind Fury, and it's pretty tough, and being a mech might help out somehow. But yeah, if you use that give a mech +2/+2 thing, suddenly it's a 3/6 with Wind Fury, which is actually pretty scary. Because unlike most Wind Fury things, it can hit something, survive, and have a decent amount of hit points left to keep it going. He's also there mainly as Hobgoblin bait, because that's the thing. Let's skip it. The Hobgoblin, right? He's a 2/3 for 3, which is not good stat. Like he loses to anything else that costs 3 mana. But whenever you play a 1-attack minion, it gets +2/+2. Suddenly, that's getting a little bit like that turns a lot of things crazy, and that's what some of these stupid 1/4s are for. Like as 6 mana play is not that impressive because it still costs you 6 mana and 2 cards. But if you got out the Hobgoblin and he didn't die for some reason, and then the next turn you play the Flying Machine, it's just a 3/6. It didn't cost you anything except keeping a Hobgoblin alive. You play the Gnomes Infantry. They're 1/4 charge taunt for 3. Like 1/4 taunt kind of makes sense. Charge on a 1/4 with taunt? That's what a stupid pairing of abilities. But he's just there to go with the Hobgoblin mainly. He's not even a mech. But if you have the Hobgoblin out, and next turn you play this guy, and you're getting a 3/6 that can attack right away, and it has taunt, that is a crazy-ass play if you have a Hobgoblin. There's the Gnomish Experimenter, which maybe a pro somewhere has a use for this. I'm sure that their beta testers do sneaky stuff. And, I mean, you could use him with any class, because these are all neutral cards. And he is a 3/2 for 3, and he draws you a card. It's just that if the card he draws is a minion, it gets turned into a chicken. So not only do you only get a chicken instead of an actual card that would be good, but if you drew a minion that was really useful that you needed for some reason or that would have helped you, you just lost it. He's not giving you a free card out of nowhere. He's taking one of your cards, and if it's a minion, he's demoting it to a chicken, which is pretty messed up. I mean, you could see how if a deck was built, if you tried to build a deck that had very few minions, then he could actually be potentially very valuable. He would most of the time be a 3/2 for 3 that just draws you a card, if your deck was all weapons and spells. But, I don't know, minions are very good, and you're going to need more incentive than this to make a deck that has very low minion count. So, we'll see if anyone tries to use him, if anyone tries to make an auctioneer, experimenter, like, hunter deck, and just use all their secrets and stuff. I don't know. Mechs that give you spare parts for the auctioneer, and I don't know. Not my kind of thing. In general, he's a pretty weak card, especially for a rare. Yeah. The Goblin Sapper is kind of interesting. He's a 2/4 for 3, so right away those are good stats. That one extra hit point compared to the Hobgoblin makes a big difference. This guy can win fights against a lot of things that your opponent might put out for 3 mana or less. The Hobgoblin will lose fights to a lot of things that your opponent played for 2 mana, which is sad. But yeah, he's a 2/4 there, and then he has +4 attack if your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand. Now, if you play him super early in the game, your opponent might not be able to dump cards fast enough. But I don't think that that's reliably going to work out. It may weaken their position just a tiny bit by encouraging them to play more cards rather than to play their cards more strategically and save things and make totems or whatever. But really, he's just there. He's a hoser for those sort of handlock decks and stuff like that. For handlocks, for Echo of Medivh mages who just want to sit there the whole game, just playing a couple of cards here and there, save up a whole bunch of stuff until they get low, and then start doing crazy molten Medivh shenanigans while their ice block makes them invincible. So he's there to try and punish that sort of thing, and mostly handlocks, I'm guessing. He's good enough that he's not going to be like a dead card. He's not going to be like a really bad card in your deck. And he doesn't hose your opponent like into the ground. I'm not a big fan of hosers. I find them pretty obnoxious. What he's hosing is a pretty general thing, so it can come up in any game, even though it's not as likely against most decks. And he's not worthless if your opponent doesn't have the thing he's there to hose. So he's okay. He's fine. I don't know if he's actually strong enough to make any difference there, but it's one of those things from game design that they put in stuff like this because even whether or not they're finding that there's a problem with that kind of decks in the meta, the existence of something that could potentially be strong against that kind of thing, just it adds to the complexity of the game in such a way that as the meta changes, expert players are given more options to adapt. So maybe he'll turn out to be a really good card if the meta turns into all handlocks and Echo of Medivh mages. Who knows? So we have the Illuminator, who works pretty well in that crazy mage combo deck I'm talking about. She's another 2/4 for 3. If you control a secret at the end of your turn, she heals your hero for 4. So she's going to trigger healing effects, which might be helpful if you were a priest, except that priests don't have secrets, so good luck with that. But realistically, so you're playing in a deck that does have secrets, because she triggers at the end of your turn, she does go off the turn she comes into play. So if you're a deck that has secrets, she is a 2/4 for 3 that heals you for 4. I mean, you're mostly going to save her until you can play a secret the same turn, or already have one out. For mages with ice block, they have a huge benefit there, because once you get down the ice block, it's not going away until you run out of hit points. And guess what? The Illuminator is making it a lot harder for you to run out of hit points. So she has some potential in those kinds of things. The Exorcist here is another hoser. I'm not. I think that Blizzard has tried pretty hard not to make the kind of stupid hosers that I don't like. When I talk about hosers, what really comes to mind is the old Star Wars CCG made by a company called Decipher. It got bought out later or something, and they had a philosophy, that this like ideological thing that they said, we're never going to ban cards. Okay, if we printed something in an early expansion, it turns out to be overpowered, we will not ban your card. In order to try and make that work, what they would do is, when a card went out of control, there were some decks. I'm not going to go into the details because I'm already going too long. I'm going to run out of voice. But there were some combos involving a card called 3,720 to 1, and there was a version of the same card for the other side of the force. Whatever. It basically let someone make a deck that was almost non-interactive. It was doing weird stuff, inserting cards face up into your opponent's deck, and then when they would like pop up, it would do damage to them based on some stuff. And the whole game was about fighting with starships or characters in specific locations. And this let you almost ignore that. You just had to come up with some way to stall your opponent's ability to fight stuff. You didn't put down more locations of your own that would help your opponents to set up more battles and get more stuff going. It was non-interactive. It was like, your opponent's playing one game and you're playing another. Let's see who wins first. And since your opponent didn't know that you were going to be playing a whole different game, they probably have a lot of stuff that's not very useful against your bizarre non-interactive strategy. So, in Magic the Gathering, they would see that, and then they would come out with a new ban list, and they'd restrict that card in Type 1 and ban it from Type 2 if it was that bad. Decipher decided they would never do that. So instead, if you had a card that was like Darth side of the Force, okay, you play this card, and if you have Vader in play, he becomes like Super Saiyan and starts like crushing your opponents. And if for some reason it turned out that this card was unbalancing the environment, like everyone was playing multiple copies of Darth Side of the Force, and Vader was just owning everything, and they always won. In the next set, Decipher would come out with a card that was like the, Darth Vader has a tea party. And it would be this card that has its primary effect, which does virtually nothing. Just, it's like gain 1 force. Or it would have the secondary thing. Instead of that, if your opponent has Darth Side of the Force in play, then this would let you, discard his Darth Vader completely, like kill his Darth Vader just for playing his card. And that's it. And suddenly that would change things around, and it'd be so ridiculous that why would you ever play with Darth Side of the Force, okay? They would just not work. But then, if for some reason Darth Vader's Tea Party was messing things up, because somehow it allowed you to, just kill Vader too easily. I made bad examples, so I was doing it on the fly. But if for some reason that card started unbalancing the environment, they would make another hoser on the other side. It would be even more over the top. It would be like, if your opponent plays Darth Vader's Tea Party, take their copy of it, rip it up, and you can punch them in the face. Hosers, it's just, I find that stuff really stupid, and it all goes back to, Magic the Gathering's, circle protection stuff, where it's just, you play this card, and if your opponent, circle protection green, if your opponent is trying to kill you with green cards, it's now virtually impossible for them to do so, which is ridiculous. Now, circle protection green wasn't the worst, because green might have some cards that can blow up enchantments, which is that card type. But if you play circle protection black, one of the features of black as a color in that game, as a faction you could play, was that it tended to not have cards that could destroy enchantments. So now you just play circle of protection black, and you're like, ha! I win, sucker! Every time you do damage to me, I pay a trivial cost and prevent it. Have fun. Those things were stupid, and I don't like hosers like that. Anyhow, tangent aside, Blizzard seems to be going in a much better direction. Like the Goblin Sapper, he's stronger if your opponent is playing the kind of deck that he's designed to combat. But he doesn't ruin their day. Little Exorcist is a hoser for death rattles, right? She's a 2/3 taunt for 3, which is on the weak side, but if your opponent has her battle cry gives her +1/+1 for every opponent's death rattle minion. So if your opponent has one thing out with death rattle, which in the current environment is not a lot, suddenly she's a 3/4 taunt for 3 mana, which is actually a really good minion. If your opponent had more than one death rattle minion out, which means they're probably playing a death rattle themed deck. They don't have to be playing a deck themed off death rattle for her to come out as a 3/4. Which is still 3/4 taunt for 3 is quite good. It's far from game breaking. If your opponent is playing a Death Rattle themed deck and they have 2 Death Rattles out, she's now a taunt Yeti for 3 mana. Or if they had 3 Death Rattles out, she's coming out as a 5/6 taunt for 3, which is insane. So I like the way that works out, kind of. It's just, I still don't like hosers in general. It's kind of like a sucker move, but the way the game works, it makes more sense. It's not stupid stuff like circle of protections or decipher counters. We all know I like the ogre. He is very prone to backfire. He is not very strategic. He will mess up your strategies half the time. But I just feel that his being a 4/4 for 3, even when he goes off and attacks the wrong thing, he's tough enough that if he kills the wrong thing, there's a good chance he won't die. And that if he does die, he's probably taking it with him. So, I'm generally okay with that trail. And in constructed decks, I think he's actually pretty darn good, because if you're playing with any of the taunt givers, giving him taunt just makes him that much more dangerous. Plus, I like that his drawback, the ogre drawback, and there are lots of ogres now, the ogre drawback that he has, it is a big drawback, but there are also situations when it's to your advantage, mostly when your opponent has taunt or stealth minions. Because if his coin flip triggers, then he totally ignores the taunt minion. In fact, he will that's the one thing he won't hit because that's what you were attacking. If they have another taunt minion, they could hit that. But he will go. He has a 50% chance to go around the taunt minion and maybe hit something better. Maybe kill your opponent when they were hoping the taunt would protect them. And if they have stealth minions, he has a 50% chance to go and beat up the stealth minion, which that stealth guy really wasn't expecting. The spider tank, 3/4 for 3 is just solid. It is a small Yeti. I really like the Dark Cultists that came out in Noxramas for the Priest, the 3/4 with a strong death rattle. This guy is not as strong as that, except that he's a mech, so you can get a lot of use out of him. If you got out a Mech Warper the previous turn, you can play him for 2 mana. In fact, if you got out a Mech Warper the same turn, you could play this for 2 mana. Mech Warper, Spider Tank, that's a pretty good 4 mana play. The Tinkertown Technician is one of the guys where I'm not sure he's like the best thing, but for 3 mana you can get a 4/4 that doesn't have some kind of stupid ogre drawback and gives you a spare part. So he's giving you another half a card. All you have to do is arrange that you have a mech in play before you play him. It's a battle cry, so if you play him and then you play a mech later, you're not going to get the benefit. And the main problem with him is just that he's not a mech. There aren't too many places that comes up, but for example, the Warlock mech thing, that cannon, is a 3/5 for 4. At the end of your turn, it does 2 damage to a non-mech. It hits friendly stuff, so you're like, oh, I'll make a Warlock mech deck, and then, oh, I have a lot of mechs, I'll play this guy, he'll be awesome. There's a chance that you're going to blow up your own Technician. Or waste a shot on your Technician that could be used somewhere more valuable. But that's a minor drawback. Mostly, if you're playing a deck with a lot of mechs, this is another way that you can get a big fat minion for very little mana, just by virtue of your other guys all being mechs. And it gives you another spare part, which is cool. You have the Nullifier, which is pretty beefy. Like, you get 2/5 taunt for 4, and he can't be targeted. Like, you can still target him with battle cries, just like all the can't be targeted guys. But you compare him to the other 4 mana taunts, he has 1 less attack than the troll, but can't be targeted, and he's a mech. He's way better, in theory. Although, the troll being a 3/5 for 4, those are really good stats. The Nullifier doesn't kill things that he blocks anywhere near as well as the troll. It's interesting how that works out. It's not as clear-cut as it looks, but overall, I mean, he's still way more powerful than the troll overall. Being a mech is good. Being untargetable is a tremendous advantage a lot of the time. He also compares very favorably to, like, the 1/7 taunt with no abilities. He has 2/5. He's nowhere near as... Like, 1/7 is really tough. There's a much higher chance that this guy can be taken out in a single attack. Although 5 hit points is enough, it takes a really large attack to get rid of him in one go. The 1/7, they'd have to go the extra mile. That's even harder. But 1 extra attack, like a 2-attack taunt guy, is so much better than a taunt guy with 1 attack. This guy is really wearing down anything that hits him. Even big minions, when they hit him, taking 2 damage likely helps you to finish them off later. Taking 1 damage is much less likely to actually do enough to help you out. So he's pretty cool that way. Then we have the burly Rockjaw Trog. He's actually really interesting to me as a potential Yeti replacement or additional Yeti, right? Because the Yeti, you get a 4/5 for 4. It's very nice that the Yeti comes into play immune to a lot of the priest's tricks. And having that 4 attack, it just also lets him kill things a lot really well. Where this guy only has 3 attack, but he has a fairly easy condition to meet, which will make his attack bigger than the Yeti. And it's permanent. Now, you can't control it. It's whenever your opponent casts a spell, just like the small Trog. But he's getting +2 attack every time, unlike the little weenie Trog. Which means your opponent casts a single spell, and this guy is a 5/5 for 4. Now, often their spell will be to kill him, but if it's not, they're going to be sad. And if it is, then they had to spend a pretty good spell to kill him, because he's a 3/5. So, he's really interesting compared to the Yeti, and they will work out in different circumstances. Enhanso Meccano is a crazy possible win guy. He's also another taunt giver, right? To go with your Defender of Argus and your Sun taunt 2/3, whatever. He costs 4 mana and he's a 3/2. He gives each of your other minions randomly one of the following 3 abilities: Wind Fury, Taunt, or Divine Shield. So the taunt, if you have several minions out, probably one of them will get taunt to help protect you. So that's pretty good. And if you're playing with all the other things that really like taunt givers, like your eggs and your Silent Watchers and your Molten Golem, Molten Giants and stuff like that, this will work out well with most of them most of the time, even though it's random. Divine Shield, if both sides have an army, the Divine Shields should let you randomly inflict a lot of damage without taking damage back. That's really good. But also, he has a chance to give one or more of your minions Wind Fury, and even if you can't control which ones, the fact is, if you're sitting there, you have 2 minions out, and you play him, there's a reasonable chance that one of those guys is going to get Wind Fury. And that can be just like a finishing move. If you have a couple of if you have a couple Molten Giants out, and then you play Enhanso Meccano, giving even one of those Wind Fury just probably puts you over the top if you didn't have enough damage. Like if you have one Molten Giant out, if it gets Wind Fury, you might just be killing your opponent this turn, whereas the Taunt or Divine Shield will also be pretty good on him. So that's cool. Jeeves is an interesting mech for the weenie decks. It's less about him being a mech. I mean, he's a 1/4 for 4. Obviously, his stats are crap. But look at this. At the end of each player's turn, if that player has less than 3 cards, they draw cards until they have 3 cards. This means that if he was the last card in your hand, you play him, and then when you end your turn, you draw 3 cards. Think of that for like Murloc decks or any kind of crazy aggressive rush deck. That is insane. Now, your opponent can take advantage of it too, but if their deck is less rushy than yours, they're much less likely to get the advantage. If they were sitting there with 3 or more cards in their hand already, yeah, he might give them 1 or 2 cards back, but it's going to be nowhere near what you're getting. Or they might have to spend effort killing him. If they kill him, then he's dead before the end of their turn, so they're not getting a benefit. So you drew 2 or 3 cards, and they had to spend something to kill him, preventing themselves from drawing cards. He's actually, in the right kind of deck, incredibly strong, and always super annoying. He does have that backfire potential. If something unpredictable happens, your opponent ends up dumping their cards in some fashion, doesn't kill them, they just like go for your face, burn you with a lot of damage, and then they draw back their cards. He could backfire, but honestly, the way he works out, I don't think that backfires are too likely. And even though he's got a name, he is not a legendary, eh? You can totally play with 2 of these guys to help your rush deck be even rushier. He's a lean, mean, buttering machine. Then we have the Kezan Mystic. That I really don't know how I would pronounce that word, because you can do it about 4 different ways. Kezan, whatever. Skeezy Mystic. The Skeezy Mystic here, 4/3 for 4, so she's like a Spellbreaker. But instead of breaking their spells, she steals the enemy's secret. So Spellbreaker, I mean, everyone has minions that can be silenced. It would be really weird if your opponent had no minions that could be silenced. And even if they did, oh well, the minions don't have any abilities. Just like silence one of them because he has to, and move on with your life. He's still a 4/3 for 3. It could be worse. Now, she's only going to be useful against like 1/3 of the opponents, right? She's only useful against people who have secrets. Otherwise, she's just a crappy 4/3 for 3. But when there's a secret out there, she steals it. That is a hoser. That is a pretty strong hoser. I haven't seen her enough. I mean, she is rare, and I mostly play Arena. I haven't seen her enough to know how she interacts with the Mirror Entity. I think Mirror Entity probably triggers first, which you may or may not get to steal the secret. Probably not. I don't know. It's messed. but otherwise she's pretty obnoxious. Her secret stealing power. So it's going to be very strong if your opponent has a secret, and then most of the time not very good. That's more like a traditional hoser. If you steal somebody's ice block with this, they're going to be pissed. Then we have the Lost Longstrider here, which, in addition to being an anti-Yeti, right, just a 5/4 for 4, it fights Yetis. They both die. That's what it does. Like matter and antimatter, they annihilate each other. But it's also a large beast. It's common. I mean, there are other large beasts, but they're usually more expensive. So if you were trying to set up combos that relate around beasts and rushing, she's a much stronger sort of mid-gamey play that happens to be a beast for you. It's one that would work out pretty well with the Rhino. You can, as a 9-mana play, you can go Rhino, Lost Strider, attack with both of them, because the Rhino gives all beasts charge. Or you could play the Rhino one turn, then next turn you could play the Tall Strider and still have 2 mana left for something else. We all know the Mechanical Yeti up by now. He's just like a Yeti, but he's a mech, and he has a death rattle. In order to be a little bit more different from a Yeti, he has his death rattle, but the death rattle is revenue neutral. It gives each player a spare part, which means that you're not gaining any cards. It's just making the game more random. But a 4/5 mech for 4 is still pretty strong. Remember, there's no hoser for mechs. They're just they're probably better. I will say that my experience in the arena, I feel like the environment has accelerated enough that the game has just the average power curve of the game has gotten better to the point that Yeti isn't quite as strong as it used to be. I had a lot of Yetis in the arena. It may just be anecdotal, it may just be random, but it feels like a Yeti doesn't feel quite as strong as it used to be. So maybe they knew that when they put it in. I don't know. But more Yetis. The Mini Mage is not my favorite guy. He's a 4/1 for 4. He has stealth, so he can come out, and if there's no area of effect or random stuff, he has a pretty good chance. He's got a pretty good chance to survive if he doesn't attack. And he gives you that control. Like, you can attack with him, you can trade him for something, or you can just have him sit there and be a stealth spell damage guy, which is a cool idea. I'm not as fond of the casting costs and stuff like that, but if you have a whole bunch of spell damage stuff, and he is class neutral, so you could try it might work with all kinds of decks that I haven't thought of. Having him sit out there and just give you spell damage and be hard to remove is pretty cool. And then he can, if they don't randomly kill him somehow, you can choose your moment and use him to trade and take out a bigger minion. Or just, if you've cleared the board, you can start beating your opponent down. The Piloted Shredder, we're going to see a couple things like this, where they have a death rattle that summons a random minion. You'd think I'd hate that, because you know how much I don't like the random stuff. But it's a random minion with a specific casting cost based on how much you paid for the guy, or balanced around how much you paid for the guy. So the Piloted Shredder is really good, but the randomness isn't mind-boggling. The chances of it doing something insane and messing up your game is pretty low. It's more like the interesting kind of random. So he's only a 4/3 for 4. Those are not great stats, as you know. He is a mech, though, which means it's better, which means you can get him out third turn with if your second turn was a mech warper. That's pretty rough. And he triggers anything else that you have that likes mechs. It's fine. But he's a 4/3, and then when he dies, you're getting a random 2-cost minion. Now, 2-cost minions vary in size from a 1/1, you could get a Novice Engineer. You won't get the Battle Cry, because they're just, poofing into play. So, that would bite. But you could also get, most of them are going to be a 3/2 or 2/3, right? Somewhere in the 2/2, 3/2, or 2/3 range. Even if you get a 2/2, you just got 6/5 worth of stats for 4 mana in an uncontrolled fashion, but that second part might have a good ability that helps you. There aren't a whole lot of bad abilities that can actually hose you. There are a lot of things that might do nothing or not much. You don't want to get the Mechanical Sheep a lot of the time, just because it's out of your control, but you never know. Some game you might get the Mechanical Sheep and be like, yes, I win! Because Mechanical Sheep is strong if he comes in at the right time. So anyway, the Shredder, even if you get a Novice Engineer, you get a whole 1/1 out of it, you still got 5/4 worth of stats for 4 mana, which is kind of breaking even. So you can tell he is really good, as long as he doesn't get silenced first. And even then, this is a target-rich environment for silence. If they have to spend their silence on that, you're probably okay. The anti-heal bot, we covered him in the arena for sure. I mean, he's a 3/3 for 5. That's horrible stats. He is a mech, yay. He heals your hero for 8. That's a strong heal. It's not flexible. You can't use it to revive your big minions or whatever. But if you look at it, for 1 card, what you're getting is good. You're getting 8 health, which is a big life swing in the game, and a 3/3 for that 1 card. So is he a little bit? He's a little expensive for either one of those things, but for both, actually pretty reasonable. I did see someone using him in the stupid Mage Echo of Medivh garbage like decks, right? Because after an ice block, you can play him and regain a whole bunch of health quickly. You've been waiting the whole game, so you've had lots of time to draw him and save him up, and you're just trying to keep alive that little bit longer, get out your next ice block or whatever. Not too fond of him, but whatever. The Blingtron 3000 is pretty random ass. What? Yeah, he's crazy because he's a legendary 3/4 for 5, gives each player a weapon. What? Remember, the weapon, you're going to get to attack with that weapon first. So he's a little bit resembling a charge guy. Now, it's pretty odd. Giving your opponent a weapon, and they're so random, you can get junk. I'm assuming you can get the rogue ability weapon. Maybe you can't. If you can't get the rogues like Grappy Dagger, then the worst thing you could get would be like a 1-attack weapon with multiple uses, or I don't know, you're going to get something that you can attack with right away. It might be helpful. It's also potentially a combo with the Indiana Jones legendary, the guy where if your opponent his battle cry is he blows up a weapon, and if your opponent had a weapon for him to blow up, you draw cards equal to the uses. So that's like it's a 2 legendary 10 mana combo. Okay, it's not. I wouldn't make a deck of trying to do that by any stretch of the imagination. But theoretically, that is a play that can happen. You go Blingtron 3000, you each get a weapon, and then Harrison Ford, or whatever his name is, Harrison Jones, he's a 5/4 for 5, and you blow up the weapon they just got, so they got nothing, and you drew multiple cards. It would be a crazy play. Then we have the Bomb Lobber, who he's pretty interesting. He's a 3/3 for 5, and he just flame cannons when he comes into play. He does 4 damage to a random minion, not the enemy player. But like, as much as random is not good, I much prefer this guy to that stupid 4/2 hunter idiot. The 4/2 for 5 who does 2 damage to something. I would much rather have a 3/3 for 5 who deals 4 damage at random. The 4 damage is much more likely to actually do the job and kill something. You do have to control the situation, like play it when there are few or preferably only 1 minion in play. And a 3/3, honestly, you're playing him for the battle cry anyway. I'd rather have a 3/3 than a 4/2 most of the time. He does almost as much damage. 2 health is just too fragile, I find. But it could just be a taste thing. I don't know. He's interesting. The Fell Reaver is an 8/8 for 5. That is a pretty big-ass minion. And his drawback is strange, because it doesn't affect the battlefield at all. He's an 8/8 mech for 5, which, mech, that means if you had out a mech warper on turn 2 or 3, you could play this guy at turn 4. Your opponent goes Yeti, you go Fell Reaver. What now? So, the problem with him is, whenever your opponent plays a card, he discards the top 3 cards of your deck. That is a lot of milling. Remember, these decks are 30 cards. This guy is, like, rushing you towards fatigue, which is a pretty good way to die. If your opponent is able to play, like, 2 or 3 cards, they can nuke a horrendous percentage of your deck, both losing potentially critical cards for helping you win the game, and also racing you very quickly towards fatigue. On the other hand, even if they play 3 cards before he dies, I mean, until he dies, he is an 8/8 on the battlefield. He is probably helping you a lot. Unless your opponent is a paladin and reduces his attack to 1, in which case you are very sad. You almost would just want to not play him against the paladin. But what are you going to do? So he sucks for that. But otherwise, this is an 8/8 that is sitting out on the board and doing stuff that your opponent's going to have to deal with. So they want to get rid of him. You are probably going to lose 6 or 9 cards off your deck, but fatigue only comes up if the game goes that long. If you lose 10 cards, you still have time for 15 turn or longer game before any fatigue comes up. So, I haven't seen him in use yet, I haven't tried him yet, but theoretically he's both very powerful and very suicidal. He can be both. So we have the legendary Hemet Nessingwary, who's a 6/3 for 5, which is not great stats by my count. And his battle cry is destroy a beast, so he's like a hoser too. Now, there are a fair number of beasts, but in practice, unless your opponent is a hunter or possibly druid, they're not very likely to have the beasts. I just don't find him a particularly useful guy, but it makes sense if you played World of Warcraft. He's there, he does what he should do. I find his stats kind of weak, but on the other hand, if his stats were any better, and your opponent was like a hunter or a druid with like good beasts out, he would be really OP. If he blows up a 4/6 druid of the bear, that would be nuts. And if he had even better stats, it'd be even worse. So we have Junkbot here, who I don't think is very good. He's a 1/5 for 5. He's a mech, obviously. Whenever a friendly mech dies, he gets +2/+2. You can trigger that. If you're going to put that much effort into something, put it into the Cult Master, okay? Like, I don't know. You get 2 mechs killed, you're getting a 5/9. So, I guess that's pretty good, but I don't know. I guess you're getting a 5/9 for 5 mana if you play him and then trade 2 mechs. So maybe he's really strong. At first glance, I don't like him, but I guess you start doing the math, he can be pretty powerful, so I guess I shouldn't pass on him that quickly. The Matter Bomber, definitely not my friend. He's a very strong card. A 5/4 for 5 is okay stats, and he's just doing double Mad Bombers. He's doing 6 damage randomly split between everyone but him. You can play this guy and nuke yourself for 6 damage, or you can play him, nuke your opponent for 6 damage, or you can play him and he might strategically eliminate your opponent's entire force. Or your entire force. You don't know! He's way too random for my taste. Mimiron's Head is the legendary, that really goes with the mechs. That is craziness. So he's a 4/5 for 5, but not really. It's just, at the start of your turn, so he does have to survive a turn to do his thing. But 4/5 for 5, he's tough enough. If he survives until the beginning of your turn, and at the beginning of your turn you have at least 3 mechs, note that he is a mech, so you just need 2 mechs other than him. If all that stuff is alive at the start of your turn, you destroy them and he forms Voltron, or whatever, VO7, whatever, non-copyrighted Voltron. And I don't remember exactly the stats, but Voltron is huge. He's something like a 4/8 double Wind Fury or something. I think he's like a 4/8 that can attack 4 times a turn, and probably has some other abilities. It's craziness. I don't know how, the fact that this thing has to survive your opponent's turn, and you have to have 2 other mechs survive your opponent's turn to trigger, is probably hard to do. On the other hand, it does force your opponent to work really hard on getting rid of him. Because you're not paying that much of a premium for him as a 4/5. He's still pretty tough. And your opponent's going to be very worried about that, so it could cause some consternation for sure. But anyway, here's the Salty Dog I mentioned, the 7/4 pirate for 5 mana. He does an exciting nothing, but he helps to make the pirate deck more of a viable thing, because you have all that, whatever stuff you have that triggers off pirates, now benefits him or triggers off him, while he's simultaneously, if you just want an offense-oriented creature, that is a big friggin' attack value for 5 mana if you can keep him alive. Anyway, we have Gazlowe is a 3/6 for 6, and whenever you cast a 1 mana spell, he adds a random mech to your hand. That is some crazy card advantage there, if you can get that going. Because, of course, when you cast a 1 mana spell, what's a 1 mana spell? Oh yes, spare parts. So he's comboing off all the other spare parts, giving you more mechs, some of which may give you spare parts. He can be pretty dangerous. And we have the other legendary I got, Mogor the Ogre. 7/6 for 6 is, he's very large. There's no complaint there. But he gives all minions a 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy. So that affects him, but it actually just causes chaos, because if you're outnumbered by your opponent, and you're worried about them killing you or whatever, you can play Mogor and he will mess up their strategy. Whoever has the most minions probably has the most to lose from this randomness. And he's big enough that he can survive a little bit of beatings. Like, small minions that would normally just go for your face or they would pick off your other minions strategically, they have a good chance of accidentally running into him instead. So he causes a lot of chaos. Then we have the bigger goal. The bigger goal, just like the piloted golem, the other piloted golem, it costs a certain amount, and when it's got a death rattle that gives you a minion of various casting costs. This guy, though, 6/4 for 6, and then you're getting a 4-cost minion. That means if that goes off, you're getting a ton of stats for your 6 mana. Like, 4-cost minions vary tremendously. It could be anywhere from like a 2/4 up to, or, I mean, there are smaller ones, but it could be as something like a 2/4 or a 3/3 is pretty likely. Or it could be something as big as a Yeti, or even crazier, potentially. Which would be 4/5. Like, if you got a Yeti out of this guy, that is 10/9 worth, that 19 points worth of stats for 6 mana. And even if you just get a 3/3, that was like paying 6 mana for 9/7. That is a lot of stats. No real drawback other than potentially being silenced. And he's a mech, so he's pretty strong. We're going to get a lot more legendaries into high casting cost here. Toshli is like your spare part guy. 5/7 for 6, I really like those stats. That's pretty darn good stats. He has 1 less attack than Boulder Fist Ogre. And in exchange, he gives you a spare part when he comes into play, and a spare part when he dies. That means he works with stuff that combos off death rattles. He works with stuff that combos off battle cries. If you count a spare part as half a card, he's giving you a whole extra card over his lifespan. So that's pretty good. They are random, but he's definitely very playable. Dr. Boom is kind of nuts. 7/7 for 7 is fine. It's like that crappy golem thing, which is a mech now, so it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still it's not even a mech, because it's a golem. War Golem is, I hate the War Golem, it's bad. If you had access to all the cards, ignoring rarity, you would never play the War Golem for any reason ever. But anyway, so he's a War Golem, plus, when he comes into play, he gives you 2 1/1 boom bots. So he's giving you 2 1/1s, but their thing is, they each have a death rattle that when they die, they do, I think it's 1 to 4 damage to a single random enemy minion. Probably don't quote me on that, because I might be getting it wrong. I should have opened up the thing, because I forgot how many cards would not appear in the lists. Things that are just specific summons like that. But, yeah, 1/1s, and with death rattle, I think the death rattle is deal 1 to 4 damage to a random enemy minion. And you have 2 of them. So that's a lot of, like, explosive power he's bringing into play, really. And just already being solid for the casting cost. Not counting any death rattle combos you might have. So he's pretty decent. Trogzor the Earthinator is a 6/6 for 7. But whenever your opponent casts a spell, like, you notice that the Trogs, the bigger they get, the more they hate magic, right? And this guy, I thought it was pretty good when you get +2 attack whenever your opponent casts a spell. But with Trogzor here, whenever your opponent casts a spell, you get one of these guys. I'm not even sure. This guy might actually trigger off the spell. Probably not, but even if he doesn't trigger off that spell, getting a 3/5 minion for free every time they use a spell, that is really strong. Even if they assassinate this guy, you get a 3/5 with a good ability. He's kind of scary. Now, he's expensive. He doesn't win you the game entirely. If you guys both have minions out, your opponent can probably just take him out with minions. But played in the right circumstances, he could just seal a game for the win. The Foe Reaper 9000, despite being a heavily augmented Harvest Golem, actually doesn't have a death rattle, which is kind of surprising. But for 8 mana, you get a 6/9, and whenever he damages a minion, he damages the minions on either side as well. Which means he's not taking damage back from those, right? Like, if your opponent has a weak minion next to a strong one, he can hit the weak minion, take the weak minion's damage, and he's already pretty tough, and then do his 6 damage to the bigger minion without taking it back. Like, he is a death machine. If you're getting in an army versus army fight, he will, like, kill their army. And he's super tough. So, 8 mana is a lot for a guy who doesn't just automatically win you the game, but if the game is going to come down to a real war with minions on each side, or taunt, or whatever, this guy will help win that war, for sure. Force Tank Max, and, like, you pay 1 more mana than the stupid War Golem, you get an actual mech, and he has Divine Shield, which, as I mentioned in the arena, can be tremendously useful, or it can be really weak. If your opponent's a mage, that Divine Shield is probably going to do crap all for you. If your opponent's not a mage, though, even like a druid or a rogue, they're not going to want to stab the guy that does 7 damage. So it is pretty powerful. Now, it's easily thwarted by a weak minion. If your opponent has like a 2/2 or a 1/1 out there, they can throw at it. But it's still, that's one less thing they have to throw at its actual hit points, which are significant. So, I mean, it's a common guy, but it is a pretty strong late game play if you didn't have access to a lot of rares. Then we have the Ultimate Shredder. Should have just been funny if it was just the Shredder, but copyrighted. So yeah, Sneasel Shredder here is the legendary version. He's a 5/7 for 8, which is actually worse. Like the stats to casting cost ratio is getting like worse and worse as they get bigger. 5/7 for 8, like I like 5/7, those are pretty good stats. But for 8 mana, you would hope for a lot more stats. That's okay, because when he dies, you're going to get a random legendary minion. It's guaranteed legendary. It's not guaranteed big. I mean, you could get a little guy like Blood Mage Thalnos, which is a whole 1/1. Even then, when he dies, he draws you a card. Whatever. But even a lot of the cheap guys, the really cheap legendaries, are usually guys with huge drawbacks, and usually their huge drawbacks are battle cries that you can just totally ignore. So if this guy gives you Millhouse Mana Storm, you're not really complaining. You still got a 4/4, so he still came out to a decent amount of stats for his 8 mana, but but I mean, he's a 5/7, so he's solid. He's something your opponent has to deal with. He can kill other minions. And when he dies, you might just get something even crazier, like the Foe Reaper, or Mechanier Thermoplug. For 9 mana, he's the biggest legend in the set. He's a 9/7, so for a 9 mana legend, he's a little fragile. For anything, by any other standard, he's still quite tough. 7 hit points is not bad. If he was a 9/5, I'd be complaining about his fragility for the casting cost. At some point, once you reach 7 hit points, you're just not fragile. Sorry, you can survive a fireball. And you can't actually, because the person who casts fireball pays 2 more mana and does 1 more damage. But I mean, you can eat 6 damage and survive. You are not fragile, even if you were 9 mana. And of course, you play him kind of like you play a Cult Master, except instead of drawing cards, you just spawn a million leper gnomes. Which is, of course, obnoxious because you start off by trading your forces to kill your opponent's army, and you get back a bunch of leper gnomes. Then you start trading your leper gnomes for your opponent's army, and now they're doing damage to your opponent for killing their army, and every time you kill one of their minions, you get back another leper gnome. Plus, you have Mech and your Thermoplug out there doing 9 damage to something. So, yeah, he's another way to seal a game. A lot of these late game, like really expensive minions will help you seal the win, but they always require some kind of board setup to be optimal. I mean, you play 4 Reaper and your opponent doesn't have any minions, he's still a 6/9. That's still good. But there are lots of things you could have got that would have been cheaper and done as much, or they would have done more for the same cost against an opponent in that circumstance. If you play Mech and your Thermoplug and your opponent has no minions, or if you have no other minions and no good luck, because if you don't have minions in play, you probably can't kill much of your opponent's stuff right away. I mean, you can't have more than 1 mana left, so you're not going to be able to like play him in Flamestrike. You pretty much have to have an army that can suicide bomb your opponent to make this work. So it's interesting that things work out that way. But anyway, the last card of the set to go through is the Clockwork Giant. He's the new winner for Worst Giant, I believe. He's exactly like the Mountain, or I think Mountain. Yeah, he's exactly like the Mountain Giant, right? 12 mana, 8/8, 1 less for each card. But instead of being 1 less for each card in your hand, which I find to be a crappy way to do it, because it means it's forcing you to not play cards, which in many decks means that you're doing less, you're having less impact on the game with your cards. So there's a big trade-off just in getting enough cards in your hand to play him, and he never comes out all that cheap. Well, this guy doesn't have that drawback. His drawback is that he's entirely reliant on your opponent. He will be cheaper for each card in your opponent's hand. If your opponent has less than 2 cards, you just can't play him. He's like a dead card in your hand. And you draw him late game, you want to be able to just play your big minion. And you might not be able to if your opponent's emptying their hand every turn, drawing 1 card and have 10 mana to use. There are a lot of times at the end of the game where you're going to draw this guy and he's going to be a dead card. At least with the stupid Mountain Giant, you could try and save up cards for 2 turns. Although, realistically, if you're playing no cards, and you're in that circumstance where your opponent's playing whatever cards they draw and they have their full mana, you're screwed either way. But early in the game, you can plan it with the Mountain Giant. This guy is like a sucker punch. If your opponent happens to be sitting around and building up cards and not playing much, or if you have some weird way to give your opponent a bunch of cards, which is mostly just druids. If your plan is to do a druid milling deck and you can naturalize some stuff, you might be able to get this guy to work. I don't know if he would be worth it even in that deck. He's basically just good for hosing handlocks and Echo of Medivh Mages and whatever other strategy involves not playing cards. But I don't like him at all for his inability to actually for your inability to control most of the time whether or not you can get his casting cost down. That said, he's the only giant that has a keyword, and mech is a pretty good keyword, but at some point they become expensive enough that the fact that he's a mech no longer makes that much difference. Anyway, that's the Goblins vs. Gnomes expansion, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in it. I do think it's upped the power curve of the game significantly, and I don't think that's likely to change. But anyway, I'm just going to head back to the arena next time.
Show some love to the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to Demonet Games for more Hearthstone Arena and other gaming videos.